Yeah, I'm lost and numb, cold to the touch. I pretend like I don't remember your name. Every masterpiece turns to blasphemy. When I close my eyes, yeah, I still see your face. We were the thunder and the lightning, burning fire that started from a spark. I would spin you just to watch you twirl. It was us against the world. You were the rain falling on my skin. Yeah, I was dying when you pulled me in. I was your rebel and you were my girl. It was us against the world. I was your rebel and you were my girl. It was us against the world. Yeah, I'm pale gray, all dust and fade. When I call for you, all I hear back is pain. Every song must end, even diamonds fade. When the darkness comes, I'll count up my mistakes. We were the thunder and the lightning, burning fire that started from a spark. I would spin you just to watch you twirl. It was us against the world. You were the rain falling on my skin. Yeah, I was dying when you pulled me in. I was your rebel and you were my girl. It was us against the world. We were the thunder and the lightning. I was your rebel and you were my girl. It was us against the world.
I was thinking that maybe when you get back, you could come with me. Walk, work, fall in love right now and spend all our money. Jump with me. Jump with me. I've been feeling it buzzing in my fingertips. Wanna try you out. Get lost, get far away, and do what we wanna do now. Jump with me. Jump with me.
It's 7:47 p.m.
2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Impatience is growing and growing, and our frustration is showing and showing. But yeah, we keep going and going. But it's family forever. We've done it over and over. Will we ever reach the end? How do we get through the night? Do we have to fight? Ever wake ourselves to spark the willing night? Maybe we can redefine what it means to get inside.
I could not find any command that matches Paris. Would you like me to create one with this phrase? I am sorry, but I did not understand that. Please respond with yes or no if you want me to create a command for the phrase Paris. Okay,
All
see you
right.
next time.
Well, Alexa doesn't want to talk for some reason. So, anyway, tonight's show is sponsored by Puppet Putty. And, of course, if you guys have been to our store, you've probably seen it. It looks like this. Let's see if I can get it on the camera. And it's created by Don Carlson. So if you guys are interested in some very awesome putty for stop motion, you guys might want to check it out. It helps our live show. All right, let me get rid of our screen here somehow. Here we go. All right. So welcome everybody to the show. Tonight's show, we're going to do some work on sculpting and molding as well, so it should be kind of fun. So last time we created these different faces, and these are for the mother character to look left and right. So they're pretty simple. They're not actually very difficult. They weren't very difficult to make, but these are going to be like our master sculpts. So from these two expressions, we're going to be creating a whole lot of, well, maybe not a whole lot, but quite a number of faces. So like, for example, all these which are facing forward, we'll have to create from the left and right angles, you know, for the most part. I'm not really sure if we do or not, actually. I'm trying to think. Some of the scenes might not require those kind of faces, but I do want to have at least, you know, at least 5 of each, I would say. So what we'll do is we're going to set these aside, and these will be molded. And I don't want to really, you know, waste silicone or anything. I've got some Rebound 25, and this is a part A and B, as you can see. So we're going to mix these together, and we're going to use some foam core like this, which is, or a poster board, I guess is probably the more common term for it. So we're going to use this, and we're going to cut some up. But first things first, I do want to have, for the little kids, and let me see something here. Am I missing a face? Oh, okay. This is actually supposed to be here. This is my, you know, for some reason I thought this was a smiley face this way, but it actually goes this way, and it goes with these 3. Okay, can't touch that one. I was going to touch that to sculpt, but anyway, never mind that. Where is my knife? So the bodies of these little kids are all, you know, the same. They'll all be cast in blue clay, like this one. So I'm cutting the tail off this one, and I'm going to actually just stick it on the other side. I'm going to smooth out this side, and this way the volume of clay is the same on both sides. Just going to kind of quickly go over this. So let me see here. I've got, as you can see here, I made the mold of the first body, and that's how I cast these. And this is one of the molds that I made, and we're going to make one just like this tonight. But I had to make one mold of this to get the same volume for each of these, for the purpose of consistency. So I'm going to stick that little tail over here. So as you can see, it'll look like that, and just a matter of sculpting it into here. So hopefully you guys are doing good. Oop, that's not good. I got a in the mail today. I had ordered one of the Oculus Rift virtual reality headsets, and I ordered it because I got a nice refund from the IRS this year, and And so I decided, it might be kind of cool to have, and they have a sculpting program in there, so you can sculpt in virtual reality. And so I haven't tried that yet. I just got it today, and I haven't really used it a lot. But it is really kind of a weird thing. I don't know if you guys have ever been interested in virtual reality before, but um, I'm really curious how it's going to change the future of making films. There's a few people that have made films for virtual reality, and if you go on the Steam store, it's they have they're trying to push virtual reality for video games. And so if you go to their store, they have a lot of just free stuff you can download for it. And some of the things you can download are films, and they're just free. Like I say, they're not really charging a lot for, or not charging for a lot of things related to virtual reality. In fact, the sculpting program that comes with it is called Oculus Medium, and it's free. It comes with the headset. So I'm really excited to try out all this stuff. I only tried out a few things. Like when you install it, it will take you through like a room, with different things in it, and then one room has like an alien, and then one room is of like these really simple sort of blocky characters in a forest, and it's really the thing that is really surprising about it is that the way it makes you feel immersed in a different place, like to actually feel like you're in something. And so my son has owned we've owned Minecraft for probably 4 or 5 years or something now, maybe 4 years. And so one of the things you can do is you can play Minecraft in virtual reality, and Minecraft is the cheesiest kind of, blocky game that you've ever seen. It looks like it belongs from the 1980s or something. And the game is okay. You can build stuff, and you can go in a cave, and you can explore places and all that kind of thing. And it's neat. It's pretty neat, but it's not something that you would think looks nice, and you don't feel like when you play it on a computer monitor like you're there or anything like that. But when you put the virtual reality headset on and you walk into a cave for the first time, and there's no light in it, and the cave is small and claustrophobic, and you really feel like you're in there. It's very creepy. It's a very creepy thing. And I was just thinking, what does this mean for filmmaking, and how can we use this for film, and that sort of thing. And I think that if you could create a stop motion film using virtual reality, using a camera system that's at least like 180 degrees, you would really feel like you're in it. And that would be just, man, that would be awesome. That would be like, can you imagine feeling like you're in a room with stop motion puppets, and then you look at them and they're in front of you and talking and gesturing and moving their hands, and you can see that kind of, I don't know. I'm just thinking I think the future is gonna be kind of cool, with all this new technology, not just for video games and all that, but for just people that want to create a place to like a surreal environment. I know Phil Tippett is, like I said, I think last week, Phil Tippett is getting into virtual reality, and I can see why. Once I tried it, I'm like, this has so much promise to it. So anyway, I just, I thought I'd throw that out there. Hey, Janet. And Beard says there is actually a program for VR that is like stop motion in VR. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, That would be awesome. What is it? CG type stuff, or there's some Google thing that I saw where you can animate characters in virtual reality with like using your little hand. See, they've got these hand grip things like this, and you just hold it, and it's very strange because you hold this in space and you can see your hands, and you can see this device exactly as you turn it, and at the precise distance from your body, even though your eyes are completely covered, you can see this, and it looks like it's part of you in virtual reality. It's I mean, it's so hard to explain. It's really weird. So if you can like interact with things in a stop motion environment or something, like Jack Skellington has, let's say, a Jack in the Box, and you turn the crank or something, and then like a stop motion character pops out of a box. I mean, it's simple, but just to actually see that in front of you in virtual reality, I'm just thinking it would be so much more impactful, than seeing it on a movie screen or computer monitor or whatever. Yeah, you guys, if you ever get the chance, you should try it. Okay, so now I've got the little babies' bodies, and they're sculpted. I think this is probably going to be okay, just like this. Maybe I'll just add a little bit of detail here to make it. I think it was a little bit plain before. So we got some. Maybe I'll just kind of clean this guy up as well. I've already got technically a mold of this side like this, but I'm going to alter this just a tiny bit. I want it to look a little bit more chiseled right there. And then we will mold these. In the front view, I may just add just a little bit deeper line there, and maybe just a little line here. That's good. So we got the bodies, we got the two heads. So these are going to be part of our mold here. And now for the little kid heads, I want to get my nails. My nails are getting long. But I want to sort of reverse this face, have the smile facing the other direction. Over here. Now these little kid faces are so detailed. Not necessarily detailed, but they're so small that it's going to be hard for me to... I need one of my tools. There we go. So, and I gave him really super teeny tiny cheeks that I had to sculpt into this one to make it work. And little eyebrows. Alright, so you can kind of see, hopefully, maybe. I don't know if my camera will focus on this or not, but come on. So I need to really smooth this out. especially for any close-ups. So, yep. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Beard. I've seen that too. I think it's Google that makes that. They're trying to make it so that anybody can animate and just use their hand, like the hand controllers, to move, um, like little circles, like bones on a body, but it comes out sort of like a rubber noodle type animation. It's really, like, there's not a lot of control. It's pretty neat, but it's not really so much for performance. It's just kind of like wacky stuff. Still, it's pretty cool. That's cool. Um, so Lego Nerd is saying, how many more faces do I have to make? Well, I definitely want, after I've cast these, I'm gonna be or mold these. I'm gonna be casting these two faces and making at least 5 of each of these mother faces, and then for the little kids, not really too many. The main thing is that 2 little kids are gonna um, be crying, or actually all 3 will be crying at one point. So, but let me think here. So 1 will be looking to the left, or 2 will be looking to the left, and 1 will be looking straight. So this one here will just be kind of, I'm just gonna go with 2 different angles, left and right. And I may just, make individual custom ones for different angles if I need to during certain shots. I'm not really too worried about it, because it doesn't take too long to make one of these little kid faces. They're so tiny. So I'm going to be, when I animate these, it's going to be, nothing will be, exactly set in stone in terms of replacements. I'm probably going to, on the fly, just resculpt faces as I need to for shots, like right before I animate them. The mother takes a lot more time, so that's why I put so much time in with her faces. And also the king character, I want to make sure I have a bunch for him. So that's why these are all sculpted already like that. But like I say, these little kid ones are so small that take me 2 seconds to make a new face. And I anticipate that with these little faces, there will be a lot of exaggeration for some scenes. So got the little cheeks added here. I'm just gonna kind of blend these in. So, Beard is saying the one I'm talking about is made by a technical artist in Japan. Oh, okay, something else. And so it's more of a fun toy, huh? That's cool. The Japanese are always a step ahead in terms of, robots and artificial intelligence and video games and all that stuff. They're really technical minded. They love technology. Man, these kid faces are tiny. Alright, so I got some cheeks, but I need to smooth that out. I'm going to use this here. And I'm going to be pouring the silicone in this cup. But I'm going to use it just temporarily to put in, or put some alcohol on the outside of it for my brush. Whoops, that's a bit much. Darn it. Okay. So these are the important ones, and then once you make it and you cast them, it's not a lot of work to alter these later on. But if you make a mistake and then you cast the mistake as part of the face, each one has to be fixed that you cast. That's why you want to kind of go a little bit slow with these faces and take your time. Make sure it looks nice. Kind of go over everything twice. So if you make something, don't just move on to the next thing and then kind of go back. And like with the eyeballs, I'm probably gonna have to sharpen them up just a little bit. Make sure that the head shape is good. Sometimes you could turn it upside down. Make sure it looks good from that angle. Different lighting and everything. Okay, and the eyebrows are really tiny. And we're going to be putting like little pieces of black clay there anyway. So I don't really need to sculpt those in, but I'll just add a little bit just so I remember to add them. It's like a reminder. And then let's see. So we've got, all right. So there was a reason why I was going to do something with these three faces. I remember last week I said what I was going to do, and I don't remember what it was. But I do need to cast a face going in that direction, so that doesn't really matter. What was it? I got the crying sequence. I got this. Got face facing to the right. Well, that's okay. So, is there anything else I need to do before I make a mold? I'm trying to think ahead. Got the bodies, got the faces. I don't think so. Even my fingers crossed I didn't forget anything. But alright, so what to do next? I'm going to put my cup over here. Hopefully that alcohol dries pretty quick. And let's sort of clean up a bit. I've got my knife. And got this brush over here. Alright, so what I'm going to use, if you guys are going to mix up some of your own molds and you don't want to buy expensive wooden dowel rods for mixing stuff, shish kebab skewers from the grocery store, a lot of them sell these. They're made just from bamboo and they're sharp, so be careful. But there's companies that they go out and chop some bamboo trees, dry them out, and then just make these by the bazillions. So they're really inexpensive. The only bad part is sometimes you get these like little fibers that kind of come off of them into your mold making material. It's pretty rare. The other thing is they're not consistent, and they will tend to, if you get one that's a little bit thin and you're trying to mix silicone too fast, they can sometimes break. But they're just great for, getting in the cracks of, got a lot of alcohol still. Getting in the cracks of your cup, scraping the sides, it just, and they're just so cheap. And the plastic cups, of course, are really cheap. But what I did with this one, also, if you guys are going to be mixing up small amounts of silicone, you don't want to use a giant cup, because when you pour out your silicone, all that silicone will coat the surface of your cup and stick to it, and it's very hard to get out. So for this one, it was a full-size cup, and I just used scissors and cut it down to be a manageable size. The next thing to do is you get your poster board, and now I've got, this is from the last mold that I made, so I've got like a side piece, and this will be the bottom. What I'll do is I will lay out what I need to mold. It's got mother face in that direction and this direction. And I will try to make these as close together as I can and arrange them in such a way that it doesn't take up a lot of space, because we don't want to waste silicone. That's the main thing, because silicone is expensive. Okay, so I'm going to put this away. So, how to arrange it, and you want to make sure that the way you arrange it is compact, but you also don't want to make sure, you want to make sure that your models are not too close to each other, because if they are, there's no wall in between them, and you need at least, you know, I would say, what is that, maybe 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch or so in between each model. That gives you some separation, and you have to consider that when you have larger models, you know, larger flat pieces, that the weight of the clay when you pour it inside, like in here, the weight from one will push on the other, and you can see how the wall can flex. You want to make sure your silicone, like this Rebound 25 is I guess the shore hardness is technically 25. I forget technically, like there's different shore hardnesses, but yeah, it's 25. That's all I can tell you. So it's not too firm, but not too soft, you know. But if it's too soft of a silicone, you'll run into a lot of problems. Okay, so the next thing to do is I have a hot glue gun I'm going to heat up right now. To the side, going to plug it in. Just plug it in the wall. Oh yeah, so Omar, you're talking about the digital input device for Jurassic Park that they came up with. Yep, that was pretty awesome. You would have sensors on an armature, and the sensors would translate the motion from you know, a stop motion puppet into a CG puppet. That's, unfortunately, they don't do that anymore. Is it unfortunately or fortunately? You know, I don't know. I don't know from the perspective of a animator what is better. I do know that Phil Tippett, when he did that, he was trying to make some way to transition his animator team, you know, the animation team, from you know, traditional to digital, and most of them were stop motion artists, and of course digital animation was a brand new thing for the most part. In terms of making really good stop motion or really good CG at the time, it was very rare. So they had to train their guys. Now I think I need some more. I think I need some more of this. So let me go in the garage, and I will be right back, everyone. Okay, so I've got some more poster board, and if this is not enough, no, it's definitely enough now. All right, so we need to basically, make a wall around the whole thing. This is going to be too long. This is going to be too long, so I'm going to cut these up, and the side parts will be. It's going to be Mod Podge of glued up pieces, but that's okay. Oh, did Pixar actually develop the digital input device? Or maybe Pixar created like the animation techniques and everything of that day, but technically Dennis Muren was the one to create the whole system and workflow for Jurassic Park. So I don't think Pixar did that, but maybe I'm wrong. Does anybody know for sure? So Lego Nerd says, any love for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? I made Michelangelo and Raphael out of polymer clay on my channel. Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. I like the Ninja Turtles. I grew up with the Ninja Turtles on TV all the time, and we had some of the toys. But I didn't see that movie that came out, that more recent movie with the Ninja Turtles, where they kind of made them sort of realistic looking as opposed to the cartoonish look. Seemed a little creepy though to me. Okay, let's see. This is gonna work. That'll be that side, and then one more side. Let's see. I'm gonna unplug my glue gun. I can smell it already. So I know it's hot. Then cut this one. So I don't cut all the way through. What I'm doing is going about maybe 3/4 of the way through, and then I bend it like this. And that means that there's no way that silicone can get through here. Like if I had cut this in half all the way, silicone could leak out. We don't want that. So this way we kind of minimize how much or how many parts there are. Then I can use the other piece to make a measurement and then cut this off about here. Okay. Any of you guys ever worked with silicone before? Do you have a favorite type that you've used, or any preferences for mold making purposes? And so Beard says, I've been meaning to test something out like that. I found a plugin for Blender for mocapping for different camera angles. Huh. That's fun. And so he says, I was going to test it to see if 3D scan stop motion puppets would look more natural in a 3D game engine with that method after seeing the normal mocap by Harold Halibut Kickstarter. Yeah, well, I mean, Phil Tippett did that too with his puppets, and it looks pretty cool. For their card game, I forget what the card game is called now, but they scanned all their, or some of their characters And of course they had the texture on it and everything else, you know, from the real puppets. Okay, so just gluing along the bottom edge of our styrofoam foam board. So we'll just kind of hold this and make sure it cools. Oh, okay, so Omar, that's pretty neat that Pixar did that. I guess they must have worked with them to make it, you know, make it easier for them to figure out, because Pixar was doing animation way before anybody else. Was Toy Story even out by the time that Jurassic Park came out? It was about the same time, wasn't it? Okay, I think that's good. So again, I'm just going to rearrange my characters in here. Make sure there's enough space. So I bumped them around a bit. And we're going to test fit this and see if this is good. Which it is, but I'm going to try and move things around so that I use less silicone. I think I'll put this one sideways. Oops. I think that's probably going to be as good as I can get this. It's like I want to make it slightly narrower somehow, but I think no matter what, there's no way to do that. Let's see. So Stop Mozak says, I've been subscribed and this is the first stream I've watched. What are you doing? Well, right now we're making a mold. And so we've got some foam board. And you can call it poster board. It's like a styrofoam with paper, you know, on each side. So I'm going to hot glue all this together, and this will make the form for our silicone mold. So I got some hot glue, and I'm just going to squirt it right into the crack. If I can get this in there. There we go. So our hot glue just seals up the edges around the whole thing. Which, Lego nerd, you know, you could use your Legos to make molds like this. Some people do that. So I make sure that everything is sealed with this hot glue. If there's any holes at all, the silicone will just go right through and go all over the floor. I don't want that. So Oh, okay. So Pixar was still developing the computers for Toy Story at that point. That's neat. And Omar says that Pixar was working on hardware back then. Okay. Hey, Whiskey. What's going on? So we're just making a mold here. So the hot glue that I put on, it takes a little while to cool. Um, so what I'm going to do is, since it's pretty cool now, I'm going to just make sure I go over everything one more time. And I'm going to look for any cracks. Any place that silicone can get out. And then we'll have to readjust our models one more time on the inside of the mold. So the walls of the mold are as close as we can get to the models to save on silicone, like I said. And looking around, I think we're good. This part here might leak, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more hot glue, kind of looking like in the light for any cracks that might be hard to see. And even though I've done this as well as I can, I do this with all my molds, and sometimes silicone will find a way no matter what. So once I get the silicone in here, we're just going to kind of watch it. And if there's any leaks anywhere, we're going to just take some scrap clay here and warm it up in our fingers and just push it in any cracks that there might be. But I think it's okay. Now, let's take my brush tool because it's soft. And I'm going to rearrange these once again because they shifted when I tilted it. And make sure that there's, like I say, an even amount of space in between the models and any walls and other models, and this will give the ability for the mold to stretch slightly with the clay in there. So this little head is definitely going to be over. So you can see, hopefully, that I can get my brush kind of in between all these parts. There's a little gap there. Even gap all around. So now I'm not going to try my best not to shift these again. I'm going to set this aside, and now we can start mixing our silicone. So first things first, anytime you work with chemicals or anything, wear some gloves or safety equipment. If there's anything smelly, don't ever work with smelly resins in a closed space. Make sure you have ventilation because that stuff is not, sometimes it's toxic, sometimes it's not. Technically, silicone like this is considered mostly a non-toxic substance. And I say mostly because a lot of the chemicals are not tested by anybody because there's so many of them. So many chemicals come out so often that you just never know. So always take the side of caution if you can. So the first color is this kind of orange color, and this is part B, and we're going to measure this, going to scale, and I use it so much that the button doesn't really work anymore, so just got to like press it really hard to get it to work. So this is on ounces. They say grams are better to use, but that's alright. I don't mind it being just like slightly off. The silicone is a little bit forgiving. Like if you mix up some and there's like 0.1 ounce more of one than the other in your mixture or something, it doesn't really matter. It still sets up just fine. I think this is the catalyst part. So I have to guess about how much to put in there. I think I'm going to put maybe 0.6 ounces for the first one and then the same amount for the second. So we'll have 1.2 total ounces. And if I need more, I'll mix up more. I don't want to mix up more and then you can't put it back in the bottle once you mix the two together. So you always mix up a little bit less than you think you need, and then mix up more if you need more. So it's a very fine stream, and then it should be pretty close. Should be pretty close to 0.6. Yep, there we go. Okay. So just kind of get anything back in the bottle that's left. And one thing that I do, like if you're gonna, for example, like right now I had to wipe this off. Oh. I wonder why my scale is acting like that. Well, anyway. I'm going to take a little piece of tissue paper and just clean off the tip of my mixing stick. But as I do that, I periodically touch my scale, because if you don't do that, the scale will shut off. But the weird part is that it's measuring between 0.5 and 0.6. It seems to be... See, I just tapped the bottom and now it's 0.4. Anyway, I think I might need a new battery in here, which is why it's doing that. I think I'm gonna just put in 1.1 ounces of the white, because I think it's kind of teetering on between 0.5 and 0.6. So 1.1 will be the final measurement. So it's really easy to do this. I mean, anybody can mix up silicone if you have a scale. And these scales, believe it or not, are very easy to find and not very expensive either. If you go to like an office supply store, they usually carry them because people need to weigh their packages before they ship them, which is what I use these for usually. This is one of my old mail scales. I have a nicer one for my customers now, but I used to use this one and it works just fine. I think I got, this was one of those how many years ago did it was probably like 20 bucks or something like that. It's probably about $30 today for one of these. So 1.0, it needs to be 1.1. Almost there. Just a little more. Silicone is really strange. Like if I tilt this bottle too much, I'll get a big glob of silicone. But too little, and the stream gets less and less. Oh, alright, my scale turned off. I think my battery's dying. So I'm going to guess about how much to add to make 0.1 ounces, and it's probably about this much. Yep. That's the first time that's actually happened to me, believe it or not. My scale died. Well, like I say, it should be okay anyway. Like I say, it's pretty much forgiving, so if I mix this up, that little difference in volume between the catalyst and the base is not going to make a big difference. Is it $17, Rosalie? That's pretty good. Yeah. So the price hasn't gone up then, which is nice. So you want to take your time, you want to mix it up nice and slow. Air doesn't matter so much with this because this is a thin enough silicone where the air will rise out by itself. And there's also a trick I'm going to use so that air won't be a problem with these models. Now, if you were going to use this on something that has undercuts, like a fully three-dimensional model, you will get the air bubbles along the underside of anything. So if I put this eyeball inside of the mold and I just poured the silicone around it, you'd want to do a two-part mold on this because the air bubbles that are in the silicone that would flow around the bottom edge would rise up and you'd have little air bubbles trapped in there, and your casting would show those bubbles. It would look really weird. It would look like little dimples in your casting. So especially if it's like resin or wax, whatever you pour in there, it will pick up all of that stuff. So some people use a vacuum machine on this and everything, but since everything that we're doing here is facing up, the air can only go, can rise to the surface away from the model that you're gonna, the bottom parts you won't be seeing. So we're kind of lucky that we don't have to worry about that. So I'm just gonna look on the bottom of my cup, and since this is a transparent, almost transparent cup, I can see on the bottom side if there's any like dark colored streaks along the bottom of the cup. So if there are, you want to scrape that part, where you see that. Okay, so this is probably good. So the technique that I use so that air doesn't, really get trapped anywhere is just to slowly drip your silicone all over the models in little ribbons like this. And when you do that, you just kind of let it sit there and it will seep into all the details. And I'll do this for most of my sculptures. And what happens when you make this stream like this, a long stream of silicone, is that any air bubbles that are in here will pop as they stretch out. So the stream itself pops the bubbles and degasses, your silicone. It's not really technically the way that you would normally do it with the vacuum machine, but it still does the trick. So if you look, I don't know if the camera can see it, there's like a super teeny tiny air bubble right there. And that's because when I took the stick and I transferred the silicone, the first blob was thick that came off the stick, but as it thins and the stream thins down towards the bottom, that's where the bubbles pop. So you want to keep your stream kind of long and slowly move it around, and all the stuff will cast just fine. If you see a bubble, you can always pop it. Most of these bubbles will pop anyway by themselves because the silicone takes about maybe 25 minutes before it gets a little bit hard. But it stays fluid long enough to where it just works really, really good. Okay. So, like I said, you could cast, in this particular mold, you could cast these in plastic, you can cast them in clay, wax, plaster, if you wanted to make, for some reason, plaster faces, little ones, because it's a very cheap way to make a casting, you could literally make all your puppets like this and out of plaster and paint it with acrylic paints. So if you wanted to paint your characters, even though it's plaster, you would never know it was plaster. You would just see the paint, you know. So all right, so now that everything's coated, there's no bubbles that I could see on the surface of anything. So I can just pretty much scrape the rest in here. But I'm going to try to make it even around the whole surface. As even as I can. And hopefully it will be enough silicone where I don't need to mix up more. Hopefully it will coat everything. Let's see here. Yeah, I might have to mix up just a little bit more. This is going to be really close. Like it'll just barely cover everything exactly as it needs to be. But I think the bottom edge or the thickness of the silicone along the bottom will be a little bit too thin. Let's see what it does. We'll let it sit here for a couple of 3 minutes or so. So very easy to do. Anybody can do this, you know. If you guys are wanting to make a film, if you can get some silicone, this is all you got to do, really. All right. So now that it's kind of settling here, and everything is becoming flat and even on the surface. The way that you know if it's not thick enough along the bottom is if you can see your model. And so I can just, you know, it's going to be about 2 millimeters of silicone in between the model and the surface, and that's a little bit too thin for my liking. I want there to be at least like maybe a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to probably mix up, how much more? How much more do I need? What do you guys think? So I mixed up 0.6 and 0.6 to get this much. So maybe 0.3 to be on the safe side, and 0.3 ounces. I think that would be okay. And I'll probably just use the same cup. I'm going to, and I hope the batteries are not going to die on me this time with my scale. I don't think I have any more 9-volt batteries. All right. So I'm going to set this aside. So I don't know if you guys can tell or not. Yeah, I guess you can. I can see it on the web camera. So like right here and right here are the mother faces, and you can just see like the surface sticking out just slightly. And if I show you, so here's our other mold, you know, and it is a little bit thin on one of them, but it's, you know, there's at least 3/16 I would say of thickness there, and that's a pretty safe amount of thickness. Anything less than that and you risk like accidentally punching through your mold, you know, it's that thin. So let's take our scale again so you guys can see. Take our cup here, make sure that our stick is clean, and the reason why I clean the stick is because when I dip it into the top of our canister to catch the drippings, I don't want to get the hardener inside here and harden it up. So turn our scale on and go with 0.3 ounces. Don't die on me, scale. 0.1, 0.2. And again, I don't want to make this flow too fast, because if I do, I'll get more than I need. If I go too slow, I'm just going to keep tapping this. Hopefully it will keep my scale awake. And here's a big glob, which will make it fairly close to what I need already. Alright, 0.3. And so I'll catch that and just scrape it back into the container. That's always the tricky part. Like, you know, the silicone can run away from you, and you waste a lot of money if that happens. Now we'll go with the hardener. And there's no smell to this silicone, which is nice. If you guys are worried about that, there's no odor to it. So you don't need like a fan or anything. 0.4. 0.5. So we just need one more. It's going to be close, and 0.6. Okay. We scrape it back into the container. And then always make sure you cover your silicone and make it nice and tight, because any moisture and your silicone will set up quicker and quicker as time goes on. So if you don't use the silicone, like if it sits on your shelf for a couple of months, and if the lid is open just a little bit and it's like a damp summer day, a lot of rain and stuff, then the next time you mix up that silicone, it will become hard in like 5 minutes. And you'll say, oh no, I didn't finish my mold. It's already hardened up. But if you keep it sealed, it will last pretty long. Moisture is the real killer for silicone. And one thing that I might also add with silicone, sometimes if your silicone doesn't set up, if you made a mold like this one, and let's say you didn't mix up the ratios properly, one of the tricks that they tell you is you can take a lamp and you can heat up your mold, and you can also take a damp towel like this, paper towel, put water on it on the outside, and put that lamp on there, and the heat and the moisture will actually set up your molds quicker. And sometimes you can save a mold that way. It's just an old trick, but I've never had to do that, so I don't know how well it works. I also imagine if you heat up something like this with a hot lamp, your clay characters will probably melt inside there, and I don't know if that would distort things. You know, like if it hasn't set up and the clay starts to melt, you know, what will the outcome be? Not really sure. Hey Ethan, what's going on? So we're mixing up some silicone here. We're almost done with our show, but I want to show you guys the full process. So this was 0.6 ounces total of silicone, so a small amount, and we're just doing that to coat the top part of our mold, because we mixed up a little bit less than we needed because we didn't want to waste any silicone. And this is just to kind of cover up the surface and to make sure that there's thickness. So if that's what you're going to ask, that's what we're doing. So I am taking my time mixing this up. Looking at the bottom of the cup, which I can see through, I don't see any dark streaks or any light streaks. So we're just going to take it and scrape it on in. Alright, so again, I'm not worried about air, because of course air rises and Everything is face up, so the air has no place to go but away from the models that are inside there. And we're just going to kind of evenly cover the surface. Now the silicone we poured in there previously has not set up, so even if it did set up, this fresh silicone will actually stick like it was mixed together at the same time. Silicone will stick to itself and bond to itself really, really strong. So if you make a two-part silicone mold, let's say this was the first part, and then the second part I would pour on top of this, and you wanted to separate the two halves, you would need to use some specially formulated mold release. And most of those mold releases are a bit toxic. You can also use Vaseline sometimes, but it's a little bit sketchy if that'll work, because of course silicone is oil based, so there's a possibility that it will still not help. The other way to do it would be to use something like a Krylon clear coat spray, but since nothing sticks to silicone, sometimes that stuff will tend to bead up or puddle up on your silicone. But there's this spray called Free Coat, Frekote, that you can use, which is a bit toxic, but it does separate nicely. It acts as a separator to two halves of silicone molds. And so I could, wait for this to harden, spray it with Free Coat outside preferably, and then pour silicone right, uncured silicone right on top of it, like this kind, and it would not adhere to it. It would not attach. So Free Coat. And I try to, not use anything toxic. I try to avoid that stuff if possible. But it does do the job. And I do have my spatula. I'm going to put this stick down here. And I'm just going to scrape up any last remaining bits of silicone and put it in our mold. Just like this. All right, let's see if Alexa wants to answer a question. Let's see. All right, Alexa, let's see. All right. Alexa, ask Good Vibe about end show.
I could not find any command that matches. A.
No.
Would you like me to create one with this phrase?
No.
Okay, see you next time.
Alexa, ask Good Vibe about end show.
Thanks everyone for stopping by.
There we go.
This concludes our live show. We broadcast every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central. If you liked this week's broadcast, give us a like, or subscribe to our channel for updates. Don't forget that every 5 weeks we have our popular stop-motion challenges, so don't delay. You can learn more at animateclay.com. See you next time, and happy animating.
Later, thanks for coming.